We are midway through the semester, just about, and everyone is feeling it. Stressed, overworked, overwhelmed. So how do you combat this sense of overwhelm? How do you push back against the culture of overwork? Because it doesn't have to be this way. Overwhelm is both a practical problem of having really too much to do, too much on your plate, and also a mindset. This is Course Hacks for Higher Ed. We are faculty and administration that are coming together to share our tips and secrets to demystify higher ed and help you succeed without getting burned out. I have with me today Dr. Brian Dewsbury, Associate Professor of Biological Sciences at the University of Rhode Island, and Assistant Dean Michelle Fonts, Dean of Diversity, Recruitment, and Retention. Is that right, Michelle?
You got it.
I'm going to get it one of these weeks.
One
of these weeks, man.
So our topic for today is overwhelm. And for the midpoint of the semester, this is a huge topic. I'm sure you're talking about it with your students. I know I am. Let's get into it. I want to know, what are your tips for students and faculty, really, for everyone in higher ed to deal with the overwhelm? I was overwhelmed when the semester started, and it only gets more and more and more. So how do you deal with overwhelm, and what advice do you give to students?
You mind if I go first, Brian?
Please do.
So I am encountering some real concern with students just around this topic, right? What I will say is something that I think is comforting, that I think is really unconscious, even though we should know it, is you need to understand that you're not by yourself in this. So some students are becoming overwhelmed with the fact that midterms are coming up and the assignments that are due, all of the things, right? And they're kind of in isolation, a lot of them, whether they're on campus or not. There is some sort of isolation that's happening, so they don't feel confident and comfortable being out in certain places that they used to. So it feels even more overwhelming than it used to. So I try to first assure that you're not by yourself. I feel it as well. It is very, very different today than it ever was. So you're feeling it heightened because of everything that's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, this
All
is
right.
not business as usual.
It's so not. And you're bombarded with a lot of media messages now that are different. It is so not just about the academics for students or even faculty and staff. We're in a different situation. So we end up talking about what are the things that you need to get done and when. It becomes overwhelming if you think of all 5 classes and work and all the things you have to do for that. But okay, let's talk about due dates. Let's think about one day at a time. Like, if you overwhelm yourself and say by next week, I've got to have these 65 things done, that's going to make you stagnant and not want to do anything. So let's talk about what can you do each day reasonably, with breaks in between, whether it's a walk, whether it's to have a cup of tea and chill for a minute. Talk about breaks in between all the stuff you have to do, and slowly but surely get it done. It sounds really simplistic, but I've had to remind many students. And then the other part is having someone to hold you accountable. All the times that I have in my schedule right now, probably for the next 3 weeks or so, all these accountability meetings with students that I've never had to meet so much, because they need someone to say, what'd you do? Tell me how you did it. And let's talk about. So finding someone, if it's not me, if it's not Brian, if it's not Janelle, it needs to be someone, whether it's your peer that needs to get things done as well, whatever it takes to hold yourself accountable to get those things done, especially the ones you don't feel like. We've talked about that before. You still got to get it done. So figure out how you're going to get done, because if you just sit in, I'm overwhelmed, things don't get done. So one step at a time, one day at a time, and accountability with someone, I think, have been the keys that have been very helpful for the people that I've talked to.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think once you have that overwhelmed feeling is where you feel almost paralyzed and you can't do anything. And so if you're in that state already, how do you start? I think that's where a lot of students are right now. Just getting past that first hurdle.
I tell them to look for the energy times. I think Brian and I have talked about that before, right? So Brian gets up earlier than most people I know, and he's most productive in getting what he needs to do for himself and set up his day. For me, my energy's at night. So I'll do everything around the house and for about an hour. Don't get I don't stay up 3 4 hours, but I'll write my list of things I need to do for the next day. I'll look at my calendar. I kind of space things out. So when I get up in the morning, I don't have to rush through. I have it set up because I'm not that big of a morning person, especially right now, right? That I can sleep in a little bit longer. So it really depends on the person and when they feel the most energetic to get things done. And I always say, and I think Nell, you and I talked about this, start on that thing that is a bear for you. And maybe you space it out over the week as opposed to trying to get it all done because it's hard. So don't overwhelm yourself with the hard. All right, 9 to 10, I got that. And then at night, maybe if I have a little space of time, I'll give it a half hour, space it out so it's doable to a degree, and then you can feel like, okay, I've accomplished something. So that would be my feedback around overwhelm.
I love that. And I do that also, Michelle. I set time goals for myself instead of always finishing a task goal. Because if I
Right.
say I'm going to work for 30 minutes or even 15 minutes and then I do it, I met my goal. I feel good about that.
Yes.
But if I
Yes.
say I'm going to finish that paper and I don't finish that paper, then I feel
Right.
bad about myself, even if I worked on it for 2 hours. So it's a
Yes.
bit of a
Yes.
mindset.
So now you mentioned the term scarcity mindset in the intro, and I was wondering if you could unpack that a bit more.
So I came across this term abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. And it was such a powerful idea for me because I had been approaching all of my work with this scarcity mindset. Oh, I'll never get it done. There's just too much to do. I don't have enough time. I'll never have enough time. And I started using this mantra of I have enough time. I am enough, and there is enough time. And to me, that made me feel more in control because I realized I am setting the priorities for my time, and there is time enough for me to meet my goals. And I then say, all right, I'm going to double the amount of time it's going to take me to meet this goal, but there's time enough. It's just an approach to reframing the issue to say, I've taken on what I can take on it. And part of it is what Michelle was saying, like, you do have to weed out and edit out some of the goals that are not serving you. But just going into it and saying, you know what, there's enough time to do this. I just need to restructure how I approach it so that it's not going to overwhelm me. So that's what I
Right.
mean when I'm talking about a scarcity
Right.
mindset, because then you always feel like you're scrambling, like there's never enough time.
Right. So, if I may, I'll make 2 points connected to both of what you were saying. The first is, you kind of have to know what suits you, right? Michelle lovingly calls me type A. Um, and I wish she was the only person who called me that, and she's not, right? Which means there's something to it. I am the kind of person who needs to have everything written out. And at the end of my days, I put a check mark next to my to-do list, and I want to see that there's a check mark next to everything. And even in my teaching, especially the early days of teaching, I used to like write out what happens every 10 minutes. And I've come to realize that doing that gave me a sense of control. So what put me at peace was knowing that I knew what was coming, right? Now, my sister-in-law, who I love, she's the exact opposite. The idea to her of writing things down to that level of deep, that alone, that thought makes her want to go and take a nap, right? And I'm sure there are many other people like that, and I think that's perfectly fine too. So you have to kind of figure out what is your method of planning, right? And choose a method that doesn't add to your stress, right? So because I couldn't imagine not having a list, right? I just couldn't imagine not having some sense of what's coming, right? I mean, I get better when it's vacations, right? But the other point, which I think is the more important point here, Nell, and I'm maybe surprised you didn't mention this. Earlier this summer, Nell recommended a book to me called The Slow Professor, and it really was a beautiful, beautiful book. I read a lot, and there are a lot of good books out there. Very few make me kind of stop and think about my own just life practice in the way that book did. And it's only like 3 hours long, deliberately. And one of the things they talk about many things in the book, but one of the things they bring up that I guess I have upped the ante in terms of my own voice against this is this burnout culture that we have, not just among professors, but just in America in general, right? And I see it in students. So they talk about being overwhelmed and stressed, but it's almost as like a badge of honor, right? Oh, I worked all weekend, I was up till 4. Well, no, you're supposed to be asleep at night. Like this is like this is kind of how the body works, right? And we sort of reward that type of planning by highlighting, oh, I don't know how they get so much stuff done, or this person is taking 18 credits and a job. And so let me be clear here. I don't want to be dismissive of people who, for whatever reason in life, have to balance a number of things. And so the idea of getting 8 hours sleep is actually a privilege. And I wish society was such that this wouldn't have to be a choice people has to have to make, right? But in terms of your original question, Nell, about strategies for feeling overwhelmed, maybe I always like to take kind of philosophical bent to this, but I do want people to maybe take a step back and, in your own mantra type way, just appreciate that working 80, 90 hours a week is not something you need to be striving for. All right. And so if you find yourself working 24/7 through the weekends, then you have to take a look and ask yourself, what on this needs to cut out, right? What on this can is not being done efficiently? Um, what things in the future I need to say no to, because right now what I'm doing is unsustainable, right? The health effects, when you're young, it feels like you're kind of invincible and you just do whatever, eat whatever. That stuff catches up to you, right? And it doesn't just catch up to you physically, but it catches up to you um, emotionally and mentally, because you take that idea of work into grad school, into med school, into marriages, into relationships, and there are consequences to that.
Yes.
So I really really hope that people take this episode to heart, because it's bigger than just being overwhelmed right now. It's a whole philosophy and paradigm on what constitutes good meaningful work.
Truth.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that book, and it definitely made me remember just how transformative reading that
Mm-hmm.
was. I also think that, I mean, if you're type A, I'm like type A minus, I would say. I used to be more type A and I had all my lists and everything was color coded. And then COVID hit
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling. And, we
Mm-hmm.
all have our own things going on. And so the strategies that may have worked for me in the past didn't continue to work for me right now under our new reality. So I think
Right.
we need to be empathetic to ourselves that maybe getting organized for us doesn't mean having everything in neat little boxes per se.
Mm-mm.
It can just be, you know what? You're feeling that complete paralysis of too much to do, then
Yeah.
do just one thing that day. Just one
Right.
thing during that really best feeling time of the day, like Michelle mentioned, the time where you are feeling the most focused. And that will start to build that practice. I like the word you used, Brian, a sustainable practice,
Mm-hmm.
because you're in college for 4 years. Maybe you're
Right.
considering more school after that. Then you have your career after that. It will build these habits. They will just keep perpetuating. And so if you're in the burnout culture now, that's not going away.
Mm-mm. It's gonna get worse.
Either you're going to keep doing it or you're going to actually burn out and quit entirely, which is no one wants that. So for me, I was almost on the verge of being like, I am burnt out. And then I was able to find community, change my practice to a more sustainable practice. Otherwise, I don't know if I'd still be here. I have to be honest.
Right.
I mean,
I want to just be I don't know, respectful is the word, but I want to be understanding. Yeah, that's the word. Understanding of the fact that if members of our audience are first year students, which I'm sure there's a lot of people who are first years listening to this, part of what's driving the feeling of burnout and overwhelm is you're transitioning to a new way of doing work, right? A new way of studying. You're being told that some of the things that may have worked well for you in the 12th grade is not going to give you the same kind of success now. So there's a natural transition period that has to happen, and that transition period is unfortunately sometimes going to involve some pain, as in recognizing that this method didn't cut it. I have to try this new method, and trying this new method doesn't mean you get it right away the first time, right? So some of what you might feel right now going into week 7 of school, right, is just trying to navigate this whole new ecosystem of being a college student. So it's, I guess part of the advice I'm trying to give here is don't feel this to be abnormal. Don't feel this to be a reflection of your ability to be a good student or a scholar or anything like that. This is kind of part of the process, and this is why we have this podcast, right? So to point that out, right, give you a license to feel that way and be okay with that, but then also identify a way to come out of that, so that when the next exam comes, the next quiz comes, or next semester comes, these feelings don't necessarily need to repeat themselves.
Yes, and shameless plug here, our group, the student organization Seeds of Success, that's part of what I love the most about them is
Are you that ashamed though? Are you really that ashamed?
no, not really. Um, I just want to say that having a group, it doesn't have to be Seeds of Success, but finding a group of peers
Mhm.
that you can talk to that are upperclassmen that have been through it. Because yes, overwhelm is for everyone, but you're right, Brian, the new environment that you're in going into college, even first or second year. I know some first years, even, they struggle and they're still in the second year struggling, right? This is not easy, especially in the venue that we have it right now. So I say utilize your peers, find a peer that's an upperclassman to just talk with them. And a lot of times you can find that in student organizations. I know you can with Seeds of Success. I also want to rate myself. I'm going to say that I believe that Brian is A plus.
I don't
Okay.
do color codes though.
There he is. He's at the plus. You're at the minus, and I think I'm there with you now because I want to stress that to anyone that's watching. We're grown adults, with children and have other responsibilities besides what we do, and we're struggling with it. You had to change the operation based on what's happening. So feeling alone, I get why you do in these cases, but you're so not. You may not be sitting next to someone, but there's a lot of us that are sitting in isolation, and only seeing certain people. That makes it tough as well. So all of the overwhelm is validated, but have to be in your sphere of control and sit down and say, okay, what can I do? And if I can't do it, who can I find to help me do it? That's huge.
Yeah. I
Don't
do
try to
want
do it
to,
by yourself. There's people. There are people.
I think community is incredibly important. I also want to make the point that I've started this week because I was feeling myself getting a little bit overwhelmed, not just with the things I have to do, but with the election coverage and the pandemic coverage. And so I started a news diet, cut out social media, which maybe sounds, you know, unheard of for some, but there are things in our lives that we can maybe just take off the plate, not forever, but for a couple of days, just to alleviate some of that mental pressure of keeping up with the news is like a big pressure that I feel. I'm like, you know what? I'm just
Well,
going to put it aside for now.
no, well, fully agree, Nell, and I'll just pile on there that I'm an NPR lover. I'm a monthly contributor to my local NPR station financially. And I stopped listening to NPR news many years ago. And it's not that I don't trust it, is that I just don't want to listen to the news all the time. And I am wary of social media, but one of the things I like about social media is I can choose when and how I want to engage, right? So if I want to like catch up on news and hear some really thoughtful analyses on different things, I
Mm.
go to my Twitter feed. I know which authors, on both sides of the spectrum who kind of really think about these issues. So I choose when and how much I want to read that stuff versus like the news is at this time and I must turn this on, right? And that was a big break because again, love NPR, but it was getting depressing. Like, is there any cats in trees or something we could smile about these days? Well, not that I want to smile at a cat in a tree, but you get my point.
Well,
So
I
I
think
Uh,
want
it's
to
the
interrupt
same
you guys.
mindset. Oh,
I
go
have
ahead,
to
Michelle.
I have to sign off quick because my water heater is not working.
Okay.
And the guy is at the door, of course, right now while we're recording. But please let me know when we can do this next. I think we have to keep talking and let students know that I'm here, okay?
I think this is a pretty great stopping point anyway. So thank you.
Gotta go get my
Thank you
heat.
both.
All right, y'all. Take care.
All right. We'll
Take
see
care,
you next
Michelle.
week.
See you all
Bye-bye.
next week. Bye bye.